When rain turns Manhattan alleys into confessionals, a dead man, a loyal Doberman, and one sarcastic detective find themselves tangled in loyalty, lies, and diamonds. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Subscribe so you never miss the next mystery unfolding. Nero Wolfe and the Doberman who guarded a corpse. The rain that night had opinions about everything, and none of them were polite. It came sideways down Madison Avenue, slapping my hat brim and turning my collar into a sponge. I'd been staking out a red brick apartment building where a husband with more cash than conscience was rumoured to be exercising extracurricular privileges. I had the camera, the cigarettes, and the bad luck to be in the wrong alley when the thunder decided to file a complaint with the rooftops. I was lining up the shot on a half-fogged window when I heard it, a low growl that didn't belong to weather or man, the kind of sound that makes the back of your neck wonder if it paid its insurance. I turned, and there he was, a Doberman, black coat slick as oil, standing guard over a man slumped against a green Packard. The streetlight did its best but mostly failed, throwing long, wet shadows that moved like they had somewhere to go. "Easy, fella," I said, which worked as well as telling the rain to stop. The dog's eyes caught the light, 2 amber coins that didn't blink. I took a cautious step closer, camera still hanging from my neck. The man wasn't moving, and even in the dim glow I could tell he'd clocked out for good. His hat lay a few feet away, brim up, collecting rainwater and maybe regrets. I knelt just close enough to see the collar tag. Prince, property of Dr. Elmer Coring, veterinary surgeon. I said it aloud, because talking keeps the blood circulating when you're near a corpse with a dog who hasn't decided if you're friend or postman. I reached toward the man's coat pocket, the dog's lips peeled back. Message received. The wallet had already been relieved of duty, so I settled for the mental note. By the time the red light of a squad car bounced off the alley walls, the thunder had quit complaining. 2 uniforms and 1 familiar silhouette came in, a broad shape with a hat brim like a guillotine and a cigar glowing under it. Pearly Stebbins, built to order by the Bulldog Division. Behind him, brushing off rain that wasn't afraid of him, came Inspector Kramer. "Well, if it isn't Goodwin," Stebbins said. "Didn't expect you to start moonlighting for the SPCA." "Just out walking the camera," I said. "It needs the exercise." Kramer grunted, which from him counts as a paragraph. "You and that overstuffed genius of yours collect corpses like stamps." He squatted beside the body, cigar tilting like a periscope. "Who's the customer this time?" "No customer," I said. "Pure coincidence. I was tailing a marital enthusiast, wound up with man's best friend and man's worst ending." He looked up at the Doberman, who hadn't budged. "What's with the mutt?" "Guarding something," I said. "Could be conscience, could be evidence." Kramer's hand flicked, and one of the uniforms moved in with a leash looped from his belt. The dog gave a short, furious bark but didn't bite. Maybe he was tired too. When they led him off, I noticed the muscle tremors under the slick fur, the kind that come from fear, not aggression. Stebbins opened the dead man's coat and let out a low whistle. "Wallet's gone. Nothing but a bus token and a half-soaked note. We'll see what the lab says." I leaned closer. The note was mostly a smear, but one word stood out in blue ink. "Prince." I filed that away. No one ever accused me of having wolf's brain, but I can keep a thought on a leash when I have to. Kramer straightened, exhaled smoke that curled like punctuation. "All right, Goodwin, you'll come down tomorrow for a statement. Don't go rewriting this one for your boss's memoirs." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said. "He's more into Romans than rain." He didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth considered it. "Get out of here before I remember to ask why you're carrying a camera near a murder." "Because I'm photogenic," I told him, and left before he decided otherwise. The cab driver gave me a look that said he'd seen drowned rats in better condition. When I reached the brownstone on West 35th, the clock over the stoop read 1 a.m. The rain had lightened to a sulk. I unlocked the door, tiptoed past the smell of Fritz's late-night cleanup, and headed for the office. Wolfe was in his chair, of course. If Mount Everest ever took up reading, that's what it would look like. Massive, immovable, and self-contained. He had a leather-bound Pliny open on his lap and a glass of beer beside the globe. The only thing missing was patience. He looked up when I came in, taking in the wet trench coat, the camera, and whatever expression I hadn't managed to iron out. "Good heavens, Archie, you appear as if you've been swimming through a sewer. Was the spectacle worth it?" Depends, I said, hanging the coat. Do you count a dead man and a Doberman as entertainment? His eyebrows climbed the way temperature doesn't in November. A dog? Name of Prince. Found him keeping watch over a stiff near Madison. Man's wallet was missing, but his dental work was intact. Police think robbery. I think coincidence with teeth. Wolfe closed Pliny and tapped the cover once, like sealing a tomb. You involved yourself to what degree? About ankle deep in rainwater. Kramer will want a statement, but he already decided I was scouting real estate for murder scenes. Phooey! Kramer's imagination is bounded by procedure. He frowned toward the window. A dog guarding death suggests loyalty exceeding reason. I detest loyalty without reason. Nice motto for our front door, I said. Could add no solicitors underneath. He ignored that, which was a form of acceptance. Described the animal. Standard Doberman, good coat, good teeth, better manners than some clients. He didn't touch the body, just watched it. When the uniforms leashed him, he looked more spooked than mean. Wolfe nodded slowly. Then he did not kill. Dogs do not contemplate deception. That trait remains our monopoly. He rang the bell cord. Fritz appeared at the doorway, still in his white jacket, looking like a saint disturbed mid-prayer. Beer, Wolfe said. For Mr. Goodwin as well. He is damp, exhausted, and otherwise intolerable. Fritz vanished wordlessly, which is his way of approval. I dropped into the red leather chair opposite Wolfe's desk. The familiar scent of books, orchid fertilizer, and smug intellect started to dry me faster than any towel. You're not taking this one, are you? I asked. I am taking nothing, he said, eyes half closed. But a question has entered my mind, and I dislike questions without answers. That makes two of us. Kramer thinks robbery, but the wallet's absence smells rehearsed. No blood on the dog either. Enough, he lifted a finger. It is 1 o'clock. You will not disturb my digestion with canine melodrama. Sure, I said. We'll save the loyalty talk for breakfast. Archie, his tone could have trimmed marble, you will not mention dogs at breakfast. Noted, I said, though Fritz's sausages might protest the censorship. The beer arrived, cold and convincing. Wolfe sipped his as if it came from the fountain of rationality. I drank mine like a man trying to outswim thunder. When the glasses were half empty, he spoke again, softer. Do not return to that alley without my instruction. Afraid I'll get adopted by another Doberman? Afraid, he said, that Kramer will again attribute idiocy to my household, that I cannot tolerate. That was Wolfe for affection. I didn't argue. He lifted Pliny again, signalling that the world could resume orbiting around him. I finished the beer, set the glass down quietly, and headed upstairs. Behind me, the rain tapped the window in small, secret rhythms, like a dog scratching at the door of a story that wasn't done yet. The next morning started like all mornings after rain in Manhattan, gloomy, damp, and pretending to be poetic. The city had a hangover and wasn't sharing the aspirin. I'd barely finished typing my report on the alley incident when the brownstone's doorbell cut through the quiet like a creditor. At that precise moment, Wolfe was upstairs in his private jungle, conferring with orchids about moral superiority. Orchid hours are sacred, 9 to 11, no interruptions short of an earthquake or the IRS. Fritz was in the kitchen, the smell of veal stock wandering through the halls. That left me to deal with the outside world, which was exactly how Wolfe preferred it. When I opened the door, the outside world turned out to be 5'8" of tailored grief, wrapped in a dove-grey suit. Her hat matched the coat, her gloves matched the hat, and her eyes matched trouble. I'm Mrs. Elmer Corring, she said, voice low but carrying that clipped edge people use when they've spent the night not sleeping. I believe Mr. Wolfe is expecting me. He isn't, I said, but he will be in about 13 minutes when his orchids have finished their therapy session. She looked as if I'd suggested we keep her waiting in the coal bin. This is an urgent matter. They all are, I said, stepping aside. Come in, and I'll see if I can bend the laws of horticulture. She moved into the office like someone entering a courtroom, cool, composed, and daring the judge to blink first. The light from the north windows caught the sheen of her hair, not blonde, not brown, something in between that magazine writers call expensive. She took in the room, the rows of books, Wolfe's massive desk, the empty globe, and gave the faintest nod. People do that when they realize they're in the presence of wealth that doesn't need to be bragged about. When Wolfe finally came down at 11:03 sharp, she stood. He looked at her once, then at me, which was his way of asking what kind of nonsense I'd imported. "Mrs. Elmer Coring, sir," I said. "The gentleman whose dog had a bad night on Madison Avenue." He settled into his chair, pressing the arms like a king taking the throne. "Ah, you have my condolences, madam." "Thank you." She sat, crossing her legs neatly. "Inspector Kramer was kind enough to suggest that you might be involved. I assumed that meant you had an interest." Wolfe's brows met over the bridge of his nose. "I rarely have interests. They are inflicted upon me. Mr. Goodwin occasionally serves as delivery man." She smiled faintly, not flattered, just acknowledging the compliment that wasn't. "Then allow me to inflict one more. The police seem to think my husband was connected with criminals. That's a lie. Someone used him. They used his dog to make it look as though he died surrounded by his own sin." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Your husband owned the animal?" "Yes. Prince was his pride. He bred dogs, champion lines, careful genetics. He ran a small clinic on East 60th. He was respected." I said, "Respected men sometimes wind up in alleys. Usually the dog didn't do it." Her head turned toward me, and the look could have chilled gin. "You were there?" "Accidentally." "Then you know he didn't deserve that." "Ma'am," I said, "in this city people don't usually deserve murder. They just get it anyway." That earned me another look, this one softened by curiosity. "You're very blunt, Mr. Goodwin." "I've been told it saves adjectives." Wolfe cleared his throat. "May we dispense with charm? You said someone used him. Elaborate." She reached into her bag, produced a checkbook that looked as though it could support a small army, and placed it on the desk. "My husband kept a notebook. He called it his client list. It wasn't veterinary records, it was his real work. He treated animals for several private breeders, some of them wealthy, discreet people who valued secrecy more than receipts. That book vanished the night he died." Wolfe's gaze sharpened, the way a cat's does when it notices motion. "And you believe its absence relates to his death?" "I'm certain of it. If the police find it first, they'll misread everything. I want you to find it and return it to me before they can drag my husband's name through the newspapers." That was when the smell of lunch drifted in, veal, herbs, and Fritz's timing. Wolfe's hand twitched toward the bell cord, then stopped. Business before digestion was sacrilege, but a large retainer could buy a few minutes of blasphemy. "Madam," he said, "I require clarity. You accuse no one?" "Not yet, but Dr. Coring's assistant, Ned Ralston, has been very eager. He claimed my husband kept private files at the clinic. I think he's already searched for them." Wolfe's eyes closed halfway. "Eager men are dangerous. Mr. Goodwin, your impression?" "She has the kind of poise that could make a subpoena sound like a love letter," I said. Claudia Coring actually laughed, a quick, startled sound that proved she hadn't done it in days. "Is he always like this?" "Relentlessly," Wolfe said. "It is his curse and my compensation." Her laughter died quickly. "Mr. Wolfe, I know your fees are high. I'm prepared to meet them. I need someone who can read people as well as you read books." That was the mistake. Flattery before the hook. Wolfe's expression hardened. "I am not a performing psychic, madam. If you require admiration, consult a mirror." She flushed. "I meant no offense." "You did not offend," he said evenly. "But you presume. You will deposit $10,000. I will decide whether to accept the case after lunch." Her eyes widened slightly. Then she opened the checkbook again without a word. The pen moved across the paper, smooth and sure. She tore the check neatly and placed it on the desk blotter. There. Wolfe studied it as if evaluating a rare specimen. "Satisfactory. Mr. Goodwin, receipt." I pulled a form from the drawer, typed quickly, and handed it to her for signature. The act of typing always calms Wolfe. It's orderly, mechanical, and reminds him civilization still functions. When the papers were done, Fritz appeared in the doorway. "Lunch is ready, sir." "Ah." Wolfe stood, massive and deliberate. "Madam, forgive me. I must not permit the roast to congeal." Claudia rose. "Of course," he gestured to me. "Mr. Goodwin will see you out and obtain any further particulars." When she'd gone, leaving perfume that could have waged war on distraction, I turned to him. "You going to take it?" He lowered himself back into the chair with a sigh worthy of Rome's decline. You will note, Archie, that she paid for the privilege of being considered. That already makes her exceptional. So does her perfume, I said. You could train a bloodhound on it. He glared. Spare me your canine analogies. You will, after lunch, verify her statements about the assistant and the clinic. Avoid the police. Kramer's going to love that. Kramer may manage without my cooperation for the moment. The woman's agitation is genuine. Her husband's client list may conceal something beyond pedigree secrets. Like money laundering? He raised a brow. Possibly. Or blackmail. Or mere folly. Appearances deceive, Mr. Goodwin. Even dogs may be trained to lie. That line hung in the air like cigar smoke. Right, I said. And you'll be training me not to bring up the dog at lunch. He sighed. Archie. Yes, sir? Do not mention dogs at lunch. I grinned. Fui, sir? He almost smiled. Fui indeed. We went to the dining room. Fritz served the veal with rice pilaf that deserved its own biography. Wolfe ate in majestic silence, eyes half closed, while I tried to decide whether Claudia Coring was sincere or rehearsed. She'd had all the right moves, grief on a leash, anger on command, and money ready for release. Still, there'd been a tremor under the polish, fear, not of guilt, but of exposure. Halfway through dessert, Wolfe spoke without looking up. When you visit the clinic, Archie, observe the employees. The tone of their obedience will tell you what their employer required. Tone of their obedience, I repeated. You make it sound like they bark on cue. He dabbed his lips with his napkin. In some establishments, they do. At 2 o'clock, I was back in the office, phone in hand, arranging an appointment at the Coring Animal Hospital. The secretary on the other end had a voice like cold oatmeal. I hung up, typed a quick note for Wolfe, and left it on his blotter. As I reached for my hat, he called from the dining room, Archie, ensure your suit is pressed. Veterinary officers are not immune to vanity. Yes, sir. Shall I bring you a doggy bag? Silence. Then, Archie. Yes. Go. That was dismissal, approval, and amusement rolled into one. I stepped into the afternoon glare where the city had dried just enough to pretend it hadn't drowned last night. Somewhere uptown, a widow wanted her husband's name cleared, a dog waited for someone to trust, and I had a date with a kennel full of secrets. And if you think that sounded sentimental, blame the veal. The Coring Animal Hospital sat wedged between a beauty parlour and a dry cleaner on East 60th, which struck me as appropriate. Between vanity and steam, you could probably fix anything, except a murder. The brass plate by the door still read Dr. Elmer Coring, veterinary surgeon. The rain had stopped, but the street smelled like a wet dog convention that had forgotten to leave. Inside, the place had all the charm of a dentist's office with fleas. The walls were pale green, the floor tile grey, and the waiting room was occupied by one nervous poodle and a woman who looked like she'd rather be under chloroform than here. I gave the receptionist my name, and after a few minutes she led me past a row of cages where various species were pretending not to exist. I found Ned Ralston in the back surgery room, standing over a stainless steel table. He was about 30, tall, and had the kind of jaw that looked freshly patented. His white coat was spotless except for a single bloodstain at the cuff, which he either hadn't noticed or wanted me to. "You're Goodwin," he said without looking up. "Private investigator. The widow sent you?" "Not exactly. Mr. Wolfe sent me. The widow just paid the postage." He smirked. "Then let me save you the trouble. Whatever she's paying you to find, you won't. The notebook's gone. Maybe she took it." It was a neat little curveball, the kind of line that looks harmless until you remember you're standing next to a table with surgical knives. "I'll make a note," I said. "In ink, not blood." He looked at me then, grey eyes steady and cold. "Dr. Coring kept that book in a locked drawer. I checked after the police left. Empty. Whoever killed him wasn't after money. They wanted information." "Any idea what kind?" "Clients, breeding records, maybe debts. He was careful, but not careful enough." "Sounds like you didn't like him much." Ralston shrugged. "I respected him. That's more than most people get." I was about to ask who got less when a side door opened and a woman came in carrying a tray of instruments. She was slim, early 30s, with tired eyes that looked like they'd been left out in the rain too long. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the tray down. "This is Marta Baines," Ralston said. "Nurse. Miss Baines. Mr. Goodwin's the detective poking around. She nodded, but didn't meet my eyes. If it's about Dr. Coring, I've already spoken to the police. Then you've had practice, I said. Tell me this. Did he have any enemies? Her hands twisted the towel she was holding. Not that I knew. He was strict but kind. Everyone liked him. That's what they always say at funerals, I said. But somebody didn't send flowers. Ralston's mouth twitched. If you're implying one of us... I'm not implying. I'm fishing. I leaned against the counter. What about the dog, Prince? Marta's gaze flicked up, startled. He was spirited, but gentle with the doctor. I can't believe... Relax, I said. He's not on trial. Yet. Ralston moved toward a filing cabinet and yanked it open. You're wasting time. The dog was picked up 2 days before the murder. Boarding arrangements. Check the records yourself. That was the first useful thing he'd said. I pulled out the ledger and flipped through the pages. The handwriting was neat, dates in red ink. 2 days before the alley scene, there it was. Prince, transferred to temporary care. Picked up by female, name unlisted. Cash payment. Any idea who this female might be? I asked. Ralston's grin was sharp enough to slice hide. If I knew, I'd be talking to the police, not to you. Marta spoke up suddenly. Dr. Coring got a phone call that morning. He looked upset afterward. He told me to make sure Prince was ready for collection. He didn't say by whom. Did he mention meeting anyone that night? No. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But he packed a small bag before he left. He said it was just business. Ralston shot her a warning glance, but she clammed up. I closed the ledger, mentally circling the unknown woman. Thanks, folks. You've both been almost helpful. As I left, the poodle in the waiting room yipped at me like it knew something. Outside, the afternoon light had that washed-out colour that belongs to hangovers and lost hopes. I'd barely gone half a block when a black sedan with tinted glass rolled away from the curb and fell in behind me. It kept its distance, moving casual, like a shadow with insurance. I turned down 3rd Avenue, then ducked into a hardware store and came out the side door. The sedan cruised past slow, hunting. I got the license number before it turned the corner. When a car follows you in Manhattan, it's either the cops or trouble, sometimes both. By the time I made it back to the brownstone, the clock said 4:05, orchid hours, which meant Wolfe was upstairs whispering sweet Latin nothings to his plants and wouldn't be down until 6 sharp. I used the lull to type my notes and make a call to the city kennel registry. The nice lady on the line checked and confirmed that Prince had been removed from boarding by a woman paying in cash, no name given. Bureaucracy's favourite lullaby. At 6:10, Wolfe descended, frowning as though gravity had inconvenienced him. I gave him the rundown, skipping only the parts that involved me being tailed. He sat, adjusted his yellow silk handkerchief, and rang the bell for beer. Mr. Goodwin, you are an amiable instrument, occasionally even serviceable. The assistant, Ralston, is ambitious. Like a man counting someone else's inheritance, he hinted the widow might have taken the notebook. Wolfe's fingers drummed on the armrest. Ambition makes a poor kennel master. It breeds contempt faster than dogs breed puppies. Then you'll like him, I said. Phooey. I dislike people who consider obedience an art form. Fritz arrived with 2 chilled glasses. Wolfe sipped, eyes half closed in thought. The dog's conduct interests me. He guarded the corpse, not the murderer. That implies the dog was loyal to someone he trusted and unafraid of the killer. Ergo, the killer was known to him. I nodded. Which fits the wife, the assistant, or maybe this mystery lady who picked him up? Indeed. He tapped a finger on the desk blotter. If the animal was removed from Coring's care before the murder, then returned for the tableau, we may infer forethought. That suggests a person skilled in control, one accustomed to obedience. Like a trainer. Or a manipulator. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. You will locate that woman. Begin with the boarding record and trace the cash payment. A woman who buys silence with currency seldom spends wisely. I made a note. You know, you could just come along for the ride. He gave me the look reserved for insects. Do not jest. I employ legs so that I may conserve mine. I grinned. Sure, I'll report back before you finish your next beer. That would be unwise. My beer is swift. Your intellect, less so. That one landed clean. Touché, sir. He allowed himself a ghost of satisfaction. Your observation at the clinic of the nurse's tremor and the assistant's evasion was astute. Why, thank you, he raised a finger. Your luck exceeded your intellect. Thank you less, he waved me off. Dinner at 8. Do not bring the odour of kennels to my table. As I left the office, Fritz appeared with a tray of appetizers. Wolfe was already reaching for one, the case momentarily shelved behind gastronomy. That's the thing about Nero Wolfe. Death can wait, but pâté can't. I went out into the dusk thinking about that ledger entry and the woman without a name. If people could be trained like dogs, someone out there was holding the leash, and I had a feeling it wasn't the widow. I've seen enough front desks in my line of work to know the pecking order of wealth by the size of the doorman's tie knot. The elevator that carried me to Vera Leland's penthouse could have doubled as a bank vault, and the carpet inside had more forgiveness than most priests. By the time the doors opened on the 23rd floor, I'd traded the smell of traffic for one of Lily's, perfume, and expensive trouble. The door was answered by a maid who had an accent you could spread on toast. She looked me up and down like I was a delivery she hadn't ordered. "Madam is expecting you?" "She will be," I said, and handed her my card before she could close the gap. 10 seconds later, the apartment swallowed me whole. White walls, chrome and glass, with framed photographs of elegant women posing beside their pets like beauty contestants with better posture. Light poured in from the tall windows, and the city outside pretended to bow in respect. Vera Leland appeared from behind a screen, draped in a silk robe the colour of champagne that had already forgiven her for wearing it before noon. Her hair was honey blonde, arranged in deliberate disorder, and she had the kind of smile that had been practised on 1,000 camera lenses. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, letting the syllables test-drive her curiosity. "You were persistent on the phone." "I've been accused of worse," I said. "I'm here about a dog, Prince." Her eyes flickered, a fast, practised blink, but when they opened again, they were all innocence. "Ah, Dr. Coring's Dobermann. Yes, I boarded him for a few days. Poor creature." "Your version of boarding involves penthouse service?" She smiled. "I love animals. They're easier to photograph than people. Less vanity." That was a lie that almost deserved applause. "And Dr. Coring asked you to do this?" "Yes. He was a friend. Said he needed a favour just for a few days. He seemed anxious." She crossed to a sideboard, poured herself a drink the colour of optimism, and didn't offer me one. Then I read the papers. "About his death?" Her gaze held mine. "Do you think Prince did it?" "Not unless he learned how to use a chokehold. But the police like simple stories." She turned away, fiddling with a cigarette. "Simple stories sell. Just like pictures. A camera can lie better than a witness, you know." I watched her light the cigarette. Steady hands, no shake. "You'd know, Miss Leland? Your pictures tell good stories?" "They tell the ones my clients want to believe." She exhaled smoke in a perfect line. "If you're suggesting I doctored something, you'll need more than charm." "Charm's just the advance party," I said. "Truth does the heavy lifting." Her lips curved. "And which do you prefer?" "That depends on the lighting." That got me a laugh. Real, throaty, the kind you can't fake. "You do well in front of a camera, Mr. Goodwin. You have that half-sincere grin women think they can fix." "If she aimed that camera at me," I said, "I'd confess to stealing my own socks." She gave me a look over her shoulder that said she knew exactly how that line worked and still let it land. Then, business again. "If you're here for the dog, I don't know where he is now. The police took him. I cooperated fully." "I'm sure you did. One more thing." I reached into my pocket, pulled out a photocopy of the crime scene. I pointed to a corner where a black case sat partly open. "Recognize this?" The laughter drained out of her face. "My camera case." "Property of VL," I read. "You left it behind in the alley?" "I didn't leave anything in that alley. That's impossible." "Then someone borrowed it without permission and dropped it next to a corpse." She looked down at the photo again, eyes narrowing, then walked to a drawer and pulled out another identical case. "See? Mine's right here." "Neat trick," I said. "Maybe you carry spares." "I don't like your insinuations, Mr. Goodwin." "Then I'll switch to questions. Who's Benton Hale?" She froze for a fraction of a second, too short for a rookie to catch, long enough for me. "A breeder," she said finally. "He supplied Coring's show dogs. We've met at exhibitions. He's intense. Intense how? The kind of man who wants to own everything he touches. She crushed out her cigarette. Including me, once upon a time. I stopped working with him after he became difficult. That word difficult was doing a lot of heavy lifting. Does he know you helped Coring? She shrugged. Everyone knew Elmer and I were friends. Were you more than that? Her eyes lifted to mine, steady as a camera lens. You'd like that answer too much. It was getting warm in that penthouse, and not because of the radiator. The woman had nerves made of silk and wire, and she was playing a professional game. Just enough truth to sound guilty, just enough charm to make you doubt it. I took another look around. The walls were lined with contact sheets, hundreds of them. Society matrons with coiffed poodles, business magnates with terriers that probably had better stock portfolios. And there, half hidden behind a vase, was a print still drying, a shot of Dr. Coring, with a man whose face I didn't know, but whose posture screamed money and ownership. Nice composition, I said, stepping closer. She moved to block me. Client material. Confidential. I'll bet. The man with him? Benton Hale. I said confidential. I heard you. Confidential's just a synonym for interesting. She exhaled sharply, then dropped her voice. All right. Yes, that was Hale. It was taken here last month. They were arguing about breeding contracts. I stayed out of it. Long enough to take pictures. That's my business. And now your camera case shows up at a murder scene. She sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. I didn't kill him, Mr. Goodwin. I liked Elmer. He was kind, awkward, a little lost. Benton used him. He used everyone. Did Coring tell you what he was sorting out when he left the dog with you? She hesitated, eyes flicking to the window. He said he'd found something big. He didn't want anyone near the clinic until he handled it. Did he mention what it was? No, a pause. But he looked frightened. The city buzzed below us like a beehive, all noise and innocence. I filed her words away carefully. Fear isn't something men like Coring show easily. It usually means they've seen the truth too clearly. I closed my notebook and put on my hat. If you think of anything else, call Nero Wolfe. He's listed under Genius Manhattan. Her smile came back, brittle but charming. And you, Mr. Goodwin, listed under what? Depends who's asking. Then consider me curious. Curiosity's healthy, I said, heading for the door. Just don't let it bite. Outside, the elevator felt colder. I'd gotten what I came for, a connection between Coring, a breeder named Hale, and a camera case that shouldn't have been anywhere near a corpse. Whether Vera Leland was a liar, a fool, or a scared witness with lipstick, I couldn't yet tell, but her perfume followed me down 23 floors like a signed confession. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was dictating a letter to a fur importer who owed him a favour. The room smelled of old paper and the faint ghost of Fritz's coffee. You've been cavorting, Wolfe said without looking up. Your shoes squeak of perfume. She's a photographer, I said, specialises in high society and their animals, the kind of clientele that eats lobster salad and calls it a diet. Pfui, women who sentimentalise beasts are dangerous. She sentimentalises men too. I got her to admit Coring left his dog with her 2 days before his death. Also found out a breeder named Benton Hale was in the picture. Literally. That got his attention. Literally. She took photos of Coring and Hale in her penthouse. Claimed they were arguing about breeding rights. Her camera case, identical to one at the murder scene. He frowned. Identical is not identical. Did you confirm serial markings? No, but she had a spare ready to show me, and she didn't expect that photocopy. Then she anticipated scrutiny. Dangerous. Did she charm you, Archie? She tried. I'm still reviewing the evidence, he sniffed. Gallantry is a poor investigative instrument. Depends on the subject, I said. He gave me a long, baleful look, the kind that could curdle cream. You will pursue this breeder, Benton Hale, determine his dealings with Coring and whether he profits from dogs or from deceit. Sure, but if Vera Leland's in it up to her mascara, she won't stay quiet long. Silence, he said, leaning back, is the first refuge of the guilty and the second of the clever. We shall see which she is. He reached for his beer, signalling the end of conversation. I went to my desk and typed up the notes, the typewriter clacking like a metronome counting down to the next mess. When I looked up again, Wolfe was already immersed in thought, eyes half closed, hands resting like stone. I knew that pose. He was feeding the case into the machinery of his brain, where deduction simmered until it boiled. I left him to it, thinking that for a woman who claimed to love animals, Vera Leland had just thrown a very big bone into a kennel full of hungry dogs. The next morning smelled like old money and wet fur, which made sense since I was standing in front of Hale's Hounds, the kind of establishment that sold obedience at a markup. The sign over the gate gleamed brass, and beyond it, neat rows of kennels stretched like suburban homes for creatures that ate better than their owners. You could hear the soft chorus of pedigreed breathing, one bark away from a stock market crash. I'd called ahead using Saul Panzer's name to grease the gate, because Saul had already done the hard part, finding Benton Hale. The man didn't hide, he advertised. When you made your fortune breeding champion dogs for Fifth Avenue ladies and the kind of bankers who thought loyalty could be bought by the pound, you didn't shy from attention. Hale's office was a cabin-sized shrine to self-importance, hunting prints, a mounted fox head, and enough mahogany to rebuild Noah's Ark. He was in the middle of a phone call when I entered, dictating pedigree figures with the seriousness of a man buying war bonds. He hung up, gave me the once-over and smiled. "Mr. Goodwin, Saul told me you'd drop by. Sit down. Scotch?" "Not before lunch," I said, though the amber bottle looked persuasive. "You run a nice operation." He leaned back, pleased. "I run an honest operation. Breeding is science, art, and instinct. Some people think it's luck. Those people lose dogs." His eyes were pale and sharp, the kind that measure not what you say, but what you cost. "You're interested in Elmer Coring, I take it?" "I'm interested in a few things he left behind, including a Doberman named Prince." "Ah, Prince," he chuckled, showing fine teeth. "Best of Coring's line. Magnificent animal. I supplied the dam myself. Shame what happened to him." "Shame what happened to Coring too," I said. "You were partners?" "Not partners," he said quickly. "Associates. He handled the technical side, breeding, genetics, cross-testing. Brilliant, but impractical. He wanted to mix lines that weren't on paper. I warned him the Kennel Club doesn't appreciate surprises." I said, "Maybe his surprises extended beyond the kennel." He shrugged. "I wouldn't know, but he was restless lately, talked about a new market, something he called pure profit. He said it like a joke, but he wasn't laughing." That was interesting. Too interesting. I filed it between my ears for Wolfe's sorting bin. "You ever hear of a woman named Vera Leland?" I asked. He smiled like a cat eyeing a parakeet. "Photographer. Worked with us once. Pretty as a sunset and twice as expensive. Why?" "Because her camera case was found at a murder scene." He raised an eyebrow. "Elmer's?" "That's right." Hale leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Then you're implying she had something to do with it?" "I wouldn't." "Why not?" "Because she's too clever. If she killed him, she wouldn't leave evidence. And if she didn't, she's clever enough to make you think she did." The man had a talent for talking in riddles and grooming metaphors. I stood, brushing imaginary fur from my sleeve. If dogs could talk, this bunch would still plead the fifth. He laughed, a short bark of amusement. "You've got nerve, Goodwin, but be careful sniffing around the wrong kennel." "Thanks," I said, heading for the door. "I'll keep my tail tucked." Outside, Saul was waiting in his coupe. He handed me a folded note. "Picked this up from Hale's bookkeeper while you were in there. Duplicate receipts for collar shipments to Antwerp. Paid cash." "Antwerp?" I said. "The land of diamonds and better waffles." Saul grinned. "Exactly. I'll keep digging." By the time I made it back to West 35th Street, the afternoon had turned grey again, like the city didn't want to pick a mood. Fritz met me at the door with a message that Wolfe was awaiting your verbal assault in the office. Wolfe was behind the desk, a book open in front of him, The Breeding of Dogs for the Discerning Owner. His nose wrinkled as I came in, probably from the kennel perfume I'd acquired. "You reek, Archie," he said. "If I had desired the odour of damp mammals, I would have visited the zoo." "Next time I'll bring you a souvenir collar," I said, dropping into the red chair. "Hale's clean on the surface, but Saul found collar shipments to Antwerp, cash, no paper trail." His eyes gleamed. "Antwerp, diamonds." "Exactly. Coring's breeding experiments weren't about genetics. They were about smuggling, dog collars with hidden compartments." He leaned back, fingers steepled. Ingenious. Diamonds travel undetected, protected by obedience and ignorance. A splendid abuse of nature's trust. Before I could answer, the bell rang. Fritz reappeared, looking as though someone had spilled vinegar on his apron. "Inspector Kramer," he announced, and retreated like a man escaping crossfire. Kramer came in wearing the day like armor. His coat was still damp, and his cigar trailed smoke that meant trouble. "Wolfe," he said, "we've got another body, Ned Ralston, your friend from the clinic." I straightened. "Strangled?" "Yeah, and this time, no dog, but we found this." He tossed a small envelope onto Wolfe's desk. Inside was a fragment of photographic film, the kind you develop by confession. Wolfe slid it out carefully with his forefinger and held it to the lamp. The image showed part of a photograph, Dr. Elmer Corring and a woman beside a cage labelled Prince. Only their hands and the cage tag were clear, the rest of the picture was torn away. Kramer's tone was all gravel. "You know what that means?" "I know what you think it means," Wolfe said. "That Corring's death ties to smuggling and Ralston found out. Possibly, but not conclusively." Kramer's jaw tightened. "You going to share your theory or wait until there's a third corpse?" "Patience, Inspector." "Don't tell me patience," Kramer snapped. Then, catching himself, he exhaled. "Fine, but if you're holding something back, I'll have a warrant on your desk before dinner." "Dinner," Wolfe said mildly, "is at 8. If you must interrupt it, bring dessert." Kramer grunted, pocketed his cigar stub, and left. He didn't slam the door, which for him was affection. When he was gone, Wolfe looked at the film again, his face unreadable. "2 corpses, 1 dog," he said softly. "That is symmetry I do not welcome." He turned to me. "Mr. Goodwin, I require your patience." "Sorry," I said, "my supply's on back order." He ignored that. "We must determine whether these collars contain diamonds or mere deceit. Contact Saul. Tell him to verify one of the Antwerp shipments." I took out my notebook. "Anything else, Maestro?" "Yes. Avoid the photographer for now. She will either lie or seduce, and both are impediments." "Worried I'll fall for one?" He glared. "I am worried you will believe one." That was Wolfe's way of being protective, disguised as an insult but meant as armor. I grinned. "Noted. I'll stick to facts and invoices." He reached for the bell cord, and moments later Fritz appeared with 2 chilled glasses. Wolfe poured beer, the foam rising with precision. "A toast," he said, "to nature's inventiveness and man's corruption of it." I raised my glass. "And to patience. May we both find some," he sniffed. "Unlikely." We drank, and the room settled into its usual rhythm, the click of the radiator, the hum of the city beyond the windows, and Wolfe lost in thought so deep it might have required a map. The film fragment lay between us, curling slightly under the lamplight like it knew it held the next move. Somewhere out there a killer was breeding chaos, and Wolfe, God help him, was starting to enjoy the puzzle. Some mornings Manhattan looks like it woke up with its lipstick smeared. This was one of them. Grey sky, newspaper headlines damp with scandal, and me on my way to the Gazette's basement darkroom carrying a film fragment that might make or break the case. Lon Cohen had promised he'd have a man ready to work it under the enlarger. The Gazette darkroom wasn't built for comfort. It smelled like chemical ambition and bad coffee. The man in charge was a kid with red hair and the posture of someone who'd already inhaled too much fixer. He took the envelope from me and said, "This the piece from Inspector Kramer?" "Indirectly," I said. "Treat it like it's worth more than your camera." He slipped the film onto a tray, lights dimmed, and within minutes an image began to swim into being. 2 people, a man and a woman, shaking hands in front of a cage labelled Prince. Even upside down, I knew them. Dr. Elmer Corring and Vera Leland, the lady with the camera and the nerve. The tech whistled softly. "They look chummy." "They were," I said. "Question is, when?" The print finished washing, and he handed me the wet sheet with tongs. "You can take this copy, but I'd keep it dry if you plan to show it to your boss." "Thanks. He prefers his evidence crisp and his assistants dry. I'll try to manage both." Back at the brownstone, the office light was on, which meant Wolfe had finished orchid hours and was ready for the day's dose of human misery. He was already seated behind the desk when I came in, reading Le Monde and scowling at civilization in general. "Mr. Goodwin," he said without looking up, "you reek of sodium thiosulfate. Have you been swimming in the Gazette again?" Only long enough to pull this out of the developer. I slid the print across the desk. Recognize the happy couple? He adjusted his glasses, leaned forward and studied the image. Dr. Coring and Miss Leland, unmistakably. A handshake of agreement, or farewell. The inscription on the cage, Prince, is legible. Ha! And the dog himself, yes. Tell me, who took this photograph? Your guess is as good as mine. Probably a timer or one of Leland's assistants. But the film fragment Kramer found in Ralston's fist came from this roll. Interesting, Wolfe murmured. He leaned closer, squinting. What is that? There, at the margin. I came around the desk. You mean the blur on the metal? No, the reflection. Observe the faint rectangle near Miss Leland's shoulder. A calendar. Can you discern the date? I squinted. Sure enough, a blurred outline of numbers hovered in the reflection of a wall calendar. The visible date read March 2nd. That's 2 weeks before Coring took his final walk in the rain, I said. Precisely, Wolfe said. Therefore the photograph could not have been taken on the night of his death. The picture was old and placed on his person later. It is a contrivance. Someone sought to link Miss Leland to the murder retroactively. I whistled. Which means the whole thing was staged. Somebody planted that photo in his coat to make it look like she was there. Indeed. And the fragment in Ralston's hand was torn from the same roll, suggesting he discovered the deception and died for it. Wolfe's fingers tapped the desk once, twice. Mr. Goodwin, ring Inspector Kramer. I did. The connection clicked and Kramer's voice came through like gravel in a blender. Yeah, Goodwin? If Wolfe wants to gloat, tell him I'm short on cigars and patience. Relax, Inspector, I said. He just wants to brighten your day with facts. I handed the receiver to Wolfe, who took it like a man about to educate a stubborn pupil. Inspector, I have examined the photographic fragment you kindly entrusted to my scrutiny. It reveals that the picture of Dr. Coring and Miss Leland could not have been taken near the time of death. The calendar reflection fixes it at least 2 weeks earlier. You were on the verge of building a case on a false tableau. Silence, then a slow exhale of smoke through the line. You're telling me somebody planted that picture? Yes, Wolfe's tone was crisp. Someone with access to the corpse after death and sufficient cunning to direct suspicion toward Miss Leland. Who'd do that? That, Wolfe said, remains your province, though I will venture a conjecture. One who profited from both her discredit and Coring's demise. Possibly Mr. Benton Hale. Kramer grunted. The breeder. We've had him under watch, nothing yet. Then watch closer. But first, correct your timeline. If the murder was staged, your coroner's estimate of the hour must be revisited. I'll have the lab recheck it, Kramer said reluctantly. Anything else you want to tell me, or should I hire you officially and get it over with? That would be premature, Wolfe said, and his voice softened by a millimeter. But, Inspector, you are not a fool. A weary man, perhaps, but not a fool. The line stayed quiet for a heartbeat. Then Kramer said gruffly, Yeah, well, thanks, I think, and hung up. Wolfe set the phone down gently, as though to preserve the echo. He is improving, he said. Like wine or arthritis, I asked. He ignored that. Bring me the Gazette clipping of Miss Leland's last exhibition. I wish to see the subjects she favours. I fetched it from the file. Wolfe studied the spread. Photographs of women in satin gowns posing beside Pekingese and poodles. Vanity as vocation, he muttered. Yet she photographs more than dogs. She captures ownership. Observe how each subject mirrors her pet. Arrogant, docile, dependent. It is a study in hierarchy. And Dr. Coring, with his fascination for breeding, would find such imagery irresistible. You're saying they were two peas in a genetic pod, I said. She framed vanity. He bred it. Crude, but apt, he conceded. Between them, they made deception look noble. I jotted notes as he spoke, the typewriter clacking like rain on a tin roof. After a moment, I said, Wolfe, if the photo was planted, someone had access to the body before the police. That narrows it. Not sufficiently. Corpses are promiscuous in their company, particularly before official custody. Romantic, I said. So who benefits from pinning it on Leland? He closed his eyes, fingers drumming. She is beautiful, notorious, and independent. A trifecta of guilt in the male imagination. Convenient scapegoat, but perhaps not the architect. The manipulation suggests intelligence more calculating than hers, or than Hale's for that matter. I leaned back. Maybe our killer isn't breeding dogs but ideas. He opened one eye. Mr. Goodwin, refrain from metaphor. It does not become you. Neither does obedience, I said. He allowed a flicker of amusement. Touché, yet you are useful, Archie, though regrettably garrulous. Put that on my tombstone, I said. Here lies Archie Goodwin, useful, garrulous, unpaid overtime. Pfui! He reached for the bell cord, summoning Fritz, who appeared with the punctuality of a Swiss watch and the expression of a man hearing confessions through a kitchen door. Beer, Fritz, Wolfe said. This case requires lubrication. While he poured, Wolfe stared at the photograph again, his eyes half closed. Consider, he said softly, the art of photography. A lens does not lie, but it can be compelled to emit. Shadows, reflections, timing, all can shape truth into illusion. The same principle governs deceit. Our murderer understood that. Meaning what? Meaning the killer is an artist. Vera Leland fits that bill. Perhaps, yet I suspect another who understands appearances and how to weaponize them. Mr. Benton Hale, for instance. He breeds champions not for beauty but for commerce. To him, deception is pedigree. I took a swallow of my beer. You think he staged the scene? I think he orchestrated it. Whether he tightened the leash himself remains to be seen. The phone rang then, slicing through the theorizing. I picked it up. Goodwin. It was Lon Cohen, the Gazette man himself. Archie, tell Wolfe that print you left. Our lab found something else. In the corner, faint as a ghost. There's a handprint in developer residue. Small, feminine, partial thumb mark only. Send it over, I said. When I hung up, Wolfe's eyes had opened. New development? Partial print on the photo. Female. Probably Leland's, but maybe someone planted that too. He nodded once. Ah, the layers multiply, like negatives stacked in a projector, each distorting the image beneath. Truth will emerge only when light passes through them all. Poetic, for a guy who hates art. I detest artifice, he corrected. Art, properly disciplined, is deduction. Then this killer's got taste. He grunted, drained the rest of his beer, and set the glass down precisely on its coaster. Enough. We dine at 8. Between now and then you will draft a report for Kramer, excluding speculation but including my observation regarding the calendar reflection. Dispatch it by courier. Right after I wash the hypo off my hands. And, Archie, yeah? Do not visit Miss Leland tonight. Curiosity is not immunity. That was Wolfe's version of concern, disguised as bureaucracy. Understood, I said. I'll keep my distance from dangerous women and dark rooms alike. He sniffed. A vain promise. Still, see that you try. At 8 sharp, Fritz appeared to announce dinner. Wolfe rose, immense and satisfied, leaving the photo on the desk where the lamplight caught the word Prince. It glowed faintly, as though daring us to follow its reflection deeper into the lie. I shut off the light and followed him to the dining room, thinking that for a photograph meant to capture truth, it had managed to develop nothing but deceit. If money had a smell, it would reek like the hallway of Vreeland and Sons, importers of fine European jewellery. The carpet was thick enough to lose a conscience in, and the walls displayed enough gold filigree to blind a tax auditor. The place specialised in the kind of sparkle that came with discretion, exactly the kind of joint you visit when diamonds need to cross borders without paperwork or questions. The clerk behind the counter was the picture of obedience, slick hair, thin tie, and the nervous energy of a man who had read too many crime pages. I introduced myself as an assistant to a Mrs. Carmody, an imaginary dowager with a passion for luxury dog collars. It wasn't my best alias, but it didn't have to be. All it needed was a confident grin and a fountain pen. Mrs. Carmody's Pekingese, I said, has developed expensive tastes. She's looking for something European, perhaps with custom fittings. The clerk blinked twice and glanced around. European fittings, sir? We, do some custom work for private kennels. Such as Hale's hounds? I asked, just to rattle the cage. He hesitated just long enough to confirm it. Yes, occasionally. Special orders, brasswork, imported screws. Nothing illegal, of course. Of course, I said. Smuggling diamonds through dog collars would be vulgar. His smile froze like cheap ice. I wouldn't know anything about that. He knew plenty. His eyes darted toward a ledger under the counter, and I made note of the embossed address on the order slips, Crosby Street, Warehouse 12. It lined up a little too neatly with what we were starting to suspect about Hale's operation. When I left, I called Saul Panzer from a payphone. Warehouse 12, Crosby Street, I told him. Hale's boys are probably moving something worth more than kibble. Saul's voice came cool and dry through the line. I'll park and watch the door. If anything moves, you'll hear before they do. By late afternoon, the sky had gone the colour of old pewter, and the city felt like it was holding its breath. I strolled by the warehouse once, enough to get the lay of the land. The brass plaque read Barclay Shipping and Feed, which was about as subtle as hiding a machine gun in a cello case. An hour later, Saul called. Courier just left. Grey sedan, no markings. Followed it uptown. And, he paused, handoff on 58th, outside a photography studio. Recipient, Vera Leland. That one landed like a flashbulb in my brain. The lady photographer again. Either she had 9 lives or someone was framing her with enthusiasm. Back at the brownstone that evening, I brought Wolfe up to speed. He listened, chin sunk into his hand, eyes half closed as if the facts were aromas he was testing for purity. When I got to Vera Leland's name, his brow creased slightly. Pfui, he said softly. The woman's vanity is bottomless. Continue. She's either the courier or the patsy, I said. Saul's sure of the handoff. I tailed the sedan back to the warehouse and did a little improvisation. Wolfe's eyes opened. Improvisation? Let's call it civic curiosity. I reached into my coat and placed a collar on his desk. Sleek black leather with silver studs that sparkled like gilt. Identical to the one Prince wore, I borrowed it from a display case while the night watchman debated sandwiches. Wolfe glared. Borrowed? I left a receipt. Sort of. He sighed like civilization had failed him personally. Still, he took the collar, turning it in his hands as if it were a rare orchid. Then, without a word, he took his penknife and slit the inner lining. From the narrow pocket within, 3 small glittering stones rolled out onto the blotter. Diamonds, he said quietly, crude but effective, concealment within loyalty, wealth disguised as devotion. I whistled. Diamonds may be a girl's best friend, but they make lousy chew toys. He ignored the remark, arranging the stones into a small triangle. Coring must have discovered the true nature of these collars and sought to withdraw. His conscience, inconveniently active, threatened the enterprise. Ergo, silence. By Hale, I said. Or by one who profited beyond Hale, he replied. Perhaps our Miss Leland, though I doubt she possesses the will for murder. Vanity seeks attention, not concealment. I leaned against the door. So what's the next move? Call Kramer, tell him his suspects are breeding diamonds instead of dogs. Not yet. Wolfe's tone shifted into that heavy, deliberate rhythm that meant the machinery was warming. We must first confirm that this collar's origin corresponds with the warehouse records. Mr. Panzer will secure proof. You will compose a memorandum detailing the transaction with the clerk, including his mention of European fittings. Do so now, before your recollection decays further. I went to my desk and started typing. Wolfe doesn't trust my memory unless it's written in triplicate. The typewriter clacked steadily, like a detective's pulse on retainer. After 10 minutes, he spoke again. Archie. Yeah? You have done well. I stopped mid-sentence. I beg your pardon? Your enterprise, while unbecoming of a layabout, was productive. That was Wolfe's version of a standing ovation. Careful, you'll ruin your reputation. Bah, one must occasionally acknowledge efficiency, even when it strays toward impudence. He poured himself a beer, the amber light catching in the glass. Mr. Panzer will report by morning. Until then, we wait. I leaned back, watching the foam rise. We've got diamonds, collars, and corpses. If this were a dog show, we'd already have best in murder. He shot me a look that could freeze mercury. Flippancy does not expedite resolution. Neither does sitting, I said. He merely closed his eyes. You will learn patience, Archie. Someday. Sure, I said, right after I teach Fritz to play poker. That earned me a rumbling "Fui," which I took as closure. The diamonds on the desk glittered faintly in the lamplight, like loyal little witnesses waiting their turn to testify. Somewhere out there, Vera Leland was still posing under perfect lighting, Benton Hale was counting invisible profits, and Inspector Kramer was probably chewing a cigar in frustration. But here in the brownstone, Wolfe had the pieces aligned: wealth, loyalty, deceit, all wrapped neatly in leather. I shut off the typewriter and looked at the collar one last time. "You ever notice," I said, "how the more expensive something is, the worse it behaves?" Wolfe didn't open his eyes. "That principle," he said, "applies equally to dogs, diamonds, and detectives." "Touché," I said. He lifted his beer in salute, and I followed suit with my coffee. The sound of rain on the windows filled the room like applause for the dead. You could have fried an egg on the tension in Wolfe's office that night. If truth had teeth, that room would have needed a muzzle. The atmosphere had that pre-storm stillness Manhattan gets right before lightning strikes. Only the thunder was human, and Wolfe was the conductor. He'd arranged the office like a courtroom, his desk as the bench, the red leather chair as the witness stand, and me in my usual spot, ready to play bailiff, jester, or punching bag as required. The clock said 7:15. Dinner had been postponed to make room for deceit, and Fritz took it as a personal tragedy. At 7:20, the doorbell rang. Fritz appeared, immaculate but martyred. "They are here, sir," he announced as though reporting an invasion. "Show them in," Wolfe said, voice smooth as butter on granite. In came the players. Claudia Coring first, widow chic in black silk and pearls, eyes sharp enough to shave with. Behind her floated Vera Leland, all satin confidence and perfume that could bankrupt a florist. Bringing up the rear was Benton Hale, big, ruddy, wearing the smug patience of a man who thinks guilt looks good on others. They took their seats under Wolfe's gaze. I could have sworn the air got heavier. "Thank you," Wolfe began. "I regret the necessity of gathering you at this late hour, but exigency has its own schedule. I have summoned you regarding the notebook of the late Dr. Coring." Vera crossed her legs like she was posing for a camera. "You said you'd arranged its return." Wolfe inclined his head. "Arranged, yes. Returned, not yet. The object in question may be more dangerous than useful." Hale leaned forward. "Dangerous how?" "Mr. Hale," Wolfe said mildly, "your curiosity is a commendable vice. Let us say the book contains entries linking each of you, by inference, not proof, to Dr. Coring's recent activities. Its disappearance concerns you all, and its reappearance may concern you more." Claudia's hands tightened on her clutch. "Are you accusing me of theft?" "Mr. Wolfe." "I accuse no one," Wolfe said, which was his favourite way of doing exactly that. "But the truth, Mrs. Coring, is never singular. It is polyphonic." That one hung in the air like a perfume you couldn't identify. I caught Kramer's silhouette through the frosted glass of the adjoining room, cigar glowing faintly, listening. Wolfe had tipped him off earlier that something might clarify itself tonight. That was Wolfe speak for "get your warrant pad ready." He let the silence stretch, then turned his gaze to Vera. "Miss Leland, you are acquainted with Dr. Coring professionally?" She smiled. "Photographically. He commissioned a series of portraits with his dogs, society vanity work." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "And yet my information shows he made payments to you beyond artistic rates, entries dated 2 weeks before his death." Her smile flickered, then held. "He invested in one of my exhibitions. A personal favour." "A philanthropic veterinarian," Wolfe murmured. "How charming. Yet you failed to mention that to Inspector Kramer." "I wasn't asked," she said, too fast. I watched Hale's eyes narrow like a man reading fine print he didn't like. Wolfe turned his bulk toward him. "Mr. Hale, your association with Dr. Coring has been described as collegial. Were you aware he intended to dissolve your business arrangement?" Hale's lips twitched. "He mentioned taking time off, that's all." "Not precisely," Wolfe said, reaching for a folder I'd placed on his desk. "According to this note, typed on his personal machine, Dr. Coring had arranged a meeting with you the night of his death." "That's ridiculous," Hale said. "I was home all evening." "Alone?" Wolfe asked. Hale glared. "With my dogs. They're better company than most people." "Doubtless," Wolfe said, eyes half-lidded, "but less reliable as alibi witnesses." Vera laughed softly. It was the wrong sound in the wrong room. Hale turned to her. "You think this is funny?" "Only tragic," she said, "for some of us." I caught Wolfe's tiny signal, an index finger tapping once on the blotter. It meant, "Keep Kramer calm." I translated it as "fetch beer," and went to the dining room where Kramer was crouched behind the half-closed door like a heavyweight in hiding. He growled low. "You getting me a beer or running interference?" "Both," I said, handing him a bottle. "He's turning the screws. You'll want to stay sober for the part where they start breaking." Back in the office, Wolfe was guiding the conversation like a barge through fog. "Mrs. Coring," he said, "you maintain your husband's clinic books were legitimate." She straightened. "I maintain nothing improper occurred there. The police have slandered his name enough." "Yet you brought this." Wolfe gestured toward the small envelope she'd placed on the desk earlier. She nodded. "A receipt. It proves I was at the Carlisle Hotel the night he died. A charity dinner." "May I?" She passed it over, hands trembling slightly. Wolfe studied it through his reading glasses. "Typed," he said. "On a machine of peculiar alignment. The lowercase e prints slightly above the line." "That's his old Underwood," she said. "The one from his office." "Ah," Wolfe's gaze sharpened, though his tone remained silk. "You say this receipt was issued at the hotel?" "Yes, from the concierge desk." "Then why," Wolfe asked, "would their typewriter suffer the identical misalignment as your husband's?" Claudia paled. I don't know. Perhaps coincidence." "Coincidence is the perfume of deceit," Wolfe said, folding the paper. "I find the scent overpowering." Vera crossed one leg over the other. "Are you accusing her now, Mr. Wolfe, or are you just collecting metaphors?" He turned to her. "Miss Leland, you supplied Dr. Coring with collars for his animals. Did you know they were modified to conceal diamonds?" Her eyes widened. "Too much." "What? No. I only photographed them for promotion. Benton handled the rest." Hale shot to his feet. "That's a lie." "Sit," Wolfe commanded, and somehow even the furniture obeyed. "If either of you leaves before I permit it, Inspector Kramer will conclude you've forfeited innocence." That settled them. Kramer's shadow moved behind the frosted glass, cigar ember brightening. Wolfe shifted slightly, a mountain preparing for avalanche. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are bound together by a man's death and by greed dressed as loyalty. Each of you lies, perhaps to me, perhaps to yourselves, but lies nonetheless." Vera tried for bravado. "Then why invite us at all?" "To observe the cracks," Wolfe said. "Cracks reveal more than confessions." Claudia rose suddenly. "I've heard enough. I'm leaving." "Sit down," I said quietly, stepping between her and the door. "The inspector behind that wall's been waiting all evening to meet you. You don't want to keep him up past his bedtime." She sat. Wolfe regarded her with something like pity. "You forged that receipt to protect your husband's memory, not yourself. Yet by doing so, you have imperiled both." Her voice was small. "You don't understand." "On the contrary," Wolfe said, "you discovered his smuggling operation, demanded he abandon it, and he agreed. But others did not. When he died, you sought to divert suspicion from his circle by providing a false alibi. It was a misplaced act of devotion." Vera's voice was brittle. "You can't prove any of this." "No," Wolfe said, "but Kramer can, once he arrests the correct party." He pressed the bell cord. The door opened instantly. Kramer entered, broad as a bulldozer, cigar clamped between teeth. "You got something for me, Wolfe?" "I have a forgery," Wolfe said, handing him the receipt, "and 3 witnesses engaged in mutual perjury. I suggest you begin there." Kramer eyed the paper, then the trio, then Wolfe. "You ever get tired of doing my job?" "Frequently," Wolfe said, "but you do not." Kramer gave a short laugh that sounded like gravel poured over justice. "Fine. Nobody leaves. Stebbins is downstairs. We'll start asking questions the old-fashioned way." He motioned to me. "Goodwin, stay put. You're on neutral ground." "I'm always neutral," I said, "just noisier." He ignored me and turned back to Wolfe. "All right, I'll play along. But if this blows up, I'm sending the DA your orchids." "Phooey," Wolfe said. "They would die of boredom." Kramer left to fetch Stebbins. The suspects sat frozen, a trio of unravelling masks. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed, the faintest smile on his lips. I said, "You realize you just dropped 3 sticks of dynamite and called it conversation?" He opened one eye. "Nonsense. Conversation implies equality. This was pedagogy." I chuckled. "Well, Professor, what now?" "Now," he said, "we dine. Fritz will reheat the souffle, and you will bring beer." Beer for you or for Kramer? Both. One requires fortification, the other redemption. That earned a grin out of me. As I moved toward the kitchen, the muffled sound of Kramer's voice drifted from the hall, sharp and authoritative. The storm had broken, and Wolfe, content as a cat after rain, reached for his glass and closed his eyes again. If you ask me, truth doesn't come out under pressure. It seeps, slow and stubborn, until someone like Wolfe traps it in his palm and names it. By the time darkness dropped its curtain on Manhattan, the city had its usual glow, the kind you get when guilt, glamour, and electricity share a lease. I was parked across from Hale's Hounds Incorporated in the Heron Coupe, collar up, nerves simmering, waiting for the play Wolfe had diagrammed like he was coaching chess with corpses. He'd spent the afternoon preparing a decoy notebook, which was a nice way of saying I'd spent 2 hours typing blank pages and pretending it was art. Wolfe dictated every instruction like the world depended on my punctuation. When I'd asked if the fake notebook might get me shot, he said, "Possibly, but I shall not be distracted by that contingency." Comforting, that man. At 9:14 exactly, my phone rang. Wolfe's voice, round and calm as a sermon. "Mr. Goodwin, the courier awaits his bait. You will deliver the ersatz ledger to Mr. Hale personally. You will not linger, you will not converse beyond necessity, and you will make note of any reaction inconsistent with composure." "In English," I said, "drop the phony notebook and see who sweats." "Precisely. And Archie, Saul and Fred are in the vicinity. You are not to improvise beyond your capacity for resurrection." That was Wolfe for Don't Get Dead. Hale's kennel looked different at night. Less empire, more fortress. A few sodium lamps hummed over the yard, and the sound of caged dogs made the air twitchy. Hale opened the door himself, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than Fritz's monthly grocery budget. His smile had all the sincerity of a politician's handshake. "Goodwin, come bearing gifts?" I handed over the notebook. "From Mr. Wolfe. Said you'd want to keep it close." He took it without opening it, but his eyes went thin. "Where did he get this?" "Trade secret," I said. "He's good at finding lost property." "Or manufacturing it." His hand twitched once on the binding, then steadied. "Tell Wolfe I appreciate his efficiency." I started to leave, but he called after me. "Goodwin, when this is over, tell Wolfe to stay out of kennels. Some dogs bite." "Sure," I said, "and some bark to hide they're scared." I left him standing in the doorway, watching me like a man who'd just been handed a snake in a paper bag. By the time I reached the corner, Saul's coupe blinked its headlights once. Signal received. The tail was on. Fred Durkin had the backup angle from the alley behind the building. Hale locked up, then 15 minutes later emerged again in a grey overcoat, clutching a briefcase the exact size of a confession. Saul's voice crackled on the radio. "He's heading east, uptown traffic's light." "Stay with him," I said. "If he detours for midnight snacks, make sure it's not blood." We followed him through the maze of city light until he turned down 58th, where the streetlights got arty and rent got criminal. He parked outside Vera Leland Studios, which figured. Romance, murder, and bad timing make a cozy trio. "Fred," I said, "take the rear. Saul, circle the block. I'm going to see if our Romeo likes surprises." The building's lobby smelled of polish and ambition. I took the elevator slow, gun resting easy in my coat pocket, more for decoration than use. By the time I reached the studio door, voices were already raised inside. Hers sharp, his sharp enough to cut. "You're insane," Vera was saying. "You'll hang us both." "Not if you keep quiet," Hale snapped. "He gave me this. Wolfe, the fat bastard, said it was the notebook. But if it's a fake, you'll fix that for me." "I'm done fixing for you, Benton. I should have told Kramer everything the night you killed him." My hand froze on the doorknob. That was my cue. Inside, something crashed. Metal on tile. I kicked the door open. Hale spun toward me, eyes wide, one hand on his briefcase, the other reaching for nothing. "Evening," I said. "Hope I'm not interrupting amateur hour." Vera stood near a camera tripod, trembling but defiant. He came for the real notebook," she stammered. "He thought I still had it." Hale sneered. "Don't play innocent. You hid it here. Where is it?" "Try smiling for the camera," I said. "Maybe it'll bring out your better side." He took a step toward her, but she shoved him hard. He slipped on the fallen tripod, hit the floor with a grunt, and when he landed, the panel of the camera safe swung ajar from the impact. Out slid a thin black book with a torn spine. I picked it up. Well, well, the missing opus. Vera covered her face with her hands. He told me to hide it. After it happened. After what? I said. Her voice cracked. After he killed Elmer. I thought if I kept quiet it would stop. He said he'd ruin me. Said the police would think I helped. Hale sat up slowly, rage building under his bruises. She's lying. She was in on it from the start. Ask her who introduced me to Coring. Both of you shut up, I said, but I might as well have asked the Hudson to quit flowing. She snapped back. You used him. You made him smuggle those stones, told him it was harmless until he found out. You killed him in that alley. Hale lunged, but Saul was through the door before he made 2 feet. Fred followed, his bulk filling the frame like a closing vault door. Hale froze. Saul nodded to me. Kramer's 2 minutes out. Wolfe said to call when the trap shut. I went to the phone by the wall and dialed the brownstone. It rang once. Wolfe speaking? It's your obedient servant, I said. The fish bit. Vera Leland's studio. Real notebook found in her safe. Hale and guilt present in equal measure. Excellent, he said, voice smooth and cool. Inspector Kramer is en route? 2 minutes. Then hold your tongue, your temper, and the evidence. I shall remain here, remotely directing, as it were, the final act. Like moving chess pieces by telephone, I said. He paused. Precisely. And Archie, don't let sentiment cloud efficiency. That was Wolfe for don't let the lady cry her way out of it. Kramer arrived like a gust of law in a brown overcoat. Stebbins at his flank. His eyes swept the room, taking in the camera lights, the safe, Hale on the floor, and Vera white as a bedsheet. All right, what's the circus? He barked. 2 rings and a confession in progress, I said. Front row seat's yours. Kramer knelt, flipping open the notebook with gloved fingers. His eyebrows twitched. Names, dates, shipment codes. Antwerp again. That does it. Hale snarled. You can't prove anything. She planted it. She's framing me. Kramer rose. Save it for the DA. Vera sank into a chair, shaking. It's true, she whispered. He came to me after Elmer died. He said if I didn't help, he'd tell the police I helped him get Elmer killed. I didn't. I loved Elmer. I only took the pictures for him for the dogs. But when I found out what was inside those collars... She broke off, sobbing. Kramer's voice softened, a rare occurrence. Go on. I told him to stop, she said. But Benton... He said it was too late, that the shipment had to move. I was supposed to distract Elmer, keep him from going to the police. But he went out that night anyway. Benton followed him. When I saw the story in the papers... You hid the real notebook, I finished. Insurance, she nodded. Yes, he came tonight to destroy it. Kramer exhaled through his cigar smoke. Hell of a mess. He turned to me. You calling this Wolfe's idea? Every move, I said. He even timed your arrival. Kramer gave a grudging grin. Someday I'll figure how he does it. Probably witchcraft. Saul stepped forward. We'll escort Hale in. Yeah, Kramer said, pulling out his cuffs. Let's see how he sings at the precinct. As Hale was led out, Vera looked at me like she wanted a pardon. I didn't have one to give. You'll have to tell the whole story, I said gently. No camera tricks. She nodded, eyes hollow. When the room emptied, I took a moment to breathe. The smell of developer chemicals mixed with fear and perfume, Manhattan's favourite cologne. Back at the brownstone an hour later, Wolfe was in his chair, the phone still beside him, untouched beer at his elbow. He opened one eye as I came in. Report. Kramer took Hale, I said. Vera cracked like cheap glass. Real notebook recovered. Saul and Fred made it clean. Excellent. And you, unharmed? Only my appetite, I said. Fritz'll fix that. He closed his eyes again. A satisfactory outcome. Justice and loyalty, reconciled imperfectly, as they always are. Sure, I said. Nothing ruins romance like a corpse in a ledger. That earned a rumbling sound that might have been approval, or hunger. Pfui, he muttered. You mistake melodrama for insight. Maybe, I said, but it sells better. He rang the bell. Fritz appeared with a tray and 2 glasses. Wolfe gestured. Beer, Archie. You have earned one. Don't mind if I do. We drank in silence for a moment, the night humming beyond the windows. The city's noise always sounds cleaner after a case closes, like someone washed the streets with reason. Finally, Wolfe said, Mr. Hale was not merely avaricious, he was faithless. Betrayal within partnership, always the most corrosive crime. Yeah, I said. I notice people don't get killed over strangers, only over things they thought they owned. He nodded, eyes heavy. Ownership, loyalty. The dog was truer than any of them. That was Wolfe for an epitaph. I finished my beer and stretched. So what now, boss? You going to write an essay on canine ethics? He scowled. Do not provoke me, Archie. The hour is late and you prattle. Sure, I said, heading for the door. But admit it, if I hadn't played delivery boy tonight, you'd still be guessing which leash fit the killer. He gave a faint smile. You performed admirably, Mr. Goodwin. Now desist before I regret saying so. Noted. I went upstairs, feeling the pleasant ache of a night that hadn't gone wrong. Behind me, the brownstone settled into its usual rhythm, the soft clink of glass, the sigh of a satisfied genius, and the echo of a loyal dog somewhere in the city that had seen too much. If Manhattan had a conscience, it would have been asleep by the time the crowd again assembled in Wolfe's office that night. Rain tapped on the windows like a stenographer recording guilt, and inside the brownstone the air was heavy with cigar smoke, damp wool, and anticipation. It wasn't the first time Wolfe had turned that room into a courtroom, but it never lost its charge. Wolfe sat behind his desk, monumental and immovable, hands resting like punctuation marks on the blotter. I was at my usual outpost, notebook in hand, ready to catch every word or bullet that flew. Inspector Kramer had taken the red chair near the door, cigar unlit but clenched, while Claudia Coring and Vera Leland faced Wolfe across the rug, like defendants at opposite ends of a noose. Hale was cooling his heels in a cell downtown, but his shadow still filled the room. Fritz had already served coffee and retreated with a look that said he preferred pots and pans to people. The clock struck 8. Wolfe cleared his throat, a sound that could make silence stand at attention. Ladies, Inspector? He inclined his head. We have come to the point of resolution. The facts, though sordid, now align as neatly as tiles in a Roman floor. Kramer grunted. Let's skip the marble and get to the meat. You shall have both, Wolfe said. First, the premise. Dr. Elmer Coring's death was not the consequence of random violence nor the whim of a jealous rival. It was orchestration, meticulous, deliberate, and cruel. Vera flinched. Claudia's jaw set tighter. The mechanism, Wolfe continued, was loyalty, a quality men exploit as readily as they counterfeit it. He turned to me. Archie, you will recall the Dobermann Prince found standing guard over the body. Like a soldier on duty, I said. Wouldn't let anyone near. Indeed. The police assumed the animal defended his master, the deceased. Logical, but false. The dog was obeying its training, not its heart. Prince had been conditioned to guard whoever bore the scent of his owner, Mr. Hale. Vera gasped softly. Kramer leaned forward, cigar forgotten. Wolfe's eyes glimmered. On the night of the murder, Hale transferred his own scent to Dr. Coring's coat, likely by handling it in the kennel under pretext of retrieving it. Thus, when the dog found the corpse, it did not grieve, it obeyed. The illusion of fidelity masked the act of betrayal. Kramer blew out a breath. Hell, that explains why the mutt wouldn't budge. We thought it was loyalty. Turns out it was programming. Precisely, Wolfe said. Mr. Hale possessed a perverse genius for obedience. He bred it, trained it, and ultimately weaponized it. He turned to Vera. You, Miss Leland, were an unwilling participant after the fact. Your confession last evening was incomplete but not dishonest. You concealed the real notebook not from avarice but fear. You loved the man Hale destroyed. Her eyes glistened. I thought if I kept it, I could protect him, at least his name. Pfui, Wolfe said softly, not unkindly. Protection built on silence is merely complicity with a velvet lining. Kramer shifted. And the widow? Wolfe's gaze slid to Claudia, who met it without blinking. Mrs. Coring forged a receipt to suggest she was elsewhere the night of her husband's death. She did so, not because she killed him, but because she feared public humiliation. She knew of his infatuation with Miss Leland and believed her falsehood might shield his memory. Claudia's knuckles whitened on her purse. I won't be judged for wanting decency. No, Wolfe said. You will merely be known for it. In this case, a milder crime than most. Kramer stood, pacing a few steps. So Hale's the killer, clean and simple. Wolfe sighed. Nothing involving humans is clean. But yes, the evidence converges. Hale discovered Coring's intent to withdraw from the smuggling scheme. He feared exposure. When persuasion failed, he arranged elimination, using his trained dog and his partner's trust. Vera whispered, "He said it was an accident." "Of course he did," Wolfe replied. "Murderers seldom boast of artifice." I watched the two women, Vera trembling under remorse, Claudia frozen under pride, and wondered which burden was heavier. The rain outside picked up, rat-a-tat against the glass, punctuation for Wolfe's monologue. He went on, voice even but gathering momentum. The diamonds, hidden within collars, the false breeding records, the film fragment showing Coring and Miss Leland with the dog Prince, its reflection dating the picture before the murder. All pieces of a tableau arranged to mislead. Even the second death Mr. Ralston's served merely to silence a witness who had glimpsed Hale's ledger. Kramer grunted. "We'll tie it up in court. DA won't need much more." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "Though if the district attorney requires rhetorical flourish, I could be persuaded. For a fee." Kramer snorted. "You'd charge for breathing if you could meter it." "That," Wolfe said, "is an indecent exaggeration. But since the matter of payment arises, Mr. Goodwin, the envelope, if you please." I handed him the thick packet Hale's attorney had delivered earlier, a settlement Wolfe had extracted through what he called a demonstration of irresistible logic. Wolfe opened it, counted deliberately, and tucked it away. "For inconvenience," he murmured. "Doubled." Kramer rolled his eyes. "Someday you'll slip and call it greed." Wolfe smiled faintly. "Greed implies want. I merely prefer symmetry." Fritz appeared then, as if summoned by the change in barometric pressure. "Beer, sir?" "Two," Wolfe said, chilled. When Fritz left, the silence filled again. Wolfe looked from Vera to Claudia, then to Kramer. "There remains, however, one innocent whose conduct surpasses all others in constancy. The Dobermann Prince." That got them all blinking. Wolfe leaned back, the faintest note of warmth creeping into his tone. The creature, deprived of conscience and avarice, obeyed his conditioning to the end. He neither betrayed nor deceived. He merely served. I wish men did as much. Kramer looked down at his cigar, then pocketed it. "You know, Wolfe," he said, "that damn brain of yours saves us a trial every time. The DA should put you on salary." Wolfe's mouth twitched. He could not afford me. For a second, just a second, Kramer smiled. "Yeah, figures." He extended his hand. "Good work. And you too, Goodwin." I took it. Always nice when we end a case with handshakes instead of subpoenas. He grunted. "Don't get used to it." Then, hat in hand, he left with a tired dignity that even rain couldn't wash off. The front door clicked shut. Fritz returned with the beer, setting one glass before Wolfe and one before me. The foam curled lazily, golden and perfect. I took a sip. "So that's that. Diamonds retrieved, dogs vindicated, and humanity rated somewhere below house pets." "An accurate summary," Wolfe said. "Maybe we should get a Doberman for the office. Train him to guard the safe, chase off salesmen, and bite anyone who says expense account." Wolfe gave me a look that could have curdled paint. "We already have one." I blinked. "He didn't mean me," I said aloud, mostly for my own benefit. "I did," Wolfe said calmly, sipping his beer. That was the kind of affection you got from Wolfe, dry, disguised, and worth more than applause. The rain softened outside. Vera and Claudia had gone, each to her own corner of regret. Kramer would be dictating his report by now, half grumbling that Wolfe made it too easy. The city would forget by morning, new crimes, new headlines. But for one night, the balance of reason and obedience had evened out. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed. "Archie," he said, "you will prepare the case file for delivery to the district attorney. Then you may retire." "Yes, sir. Anything else?" "Only this." He raised his glass. "To loyalty, when it is rightly placed." I lifted mine. "And to obedience, when it doesn't bite." He snorted, drained his glass, and reached for the bell cord. The orchids would get their evening attention next, because in Wolfe's world, order always followed chaos. As I shut off the lights and followed Fritz out, the last thing I saw was Wolfe's silhouette against the window, square and solid, like the city's conscience refusing to sleep.